Hello everyone and welcome to our first video, our first programming video for classes. So I might have already given you a conceptual, or I'm in the process of creating a conceptual for exactly what a class is. So if that's already created, make sure you watch that because it'll give you a very good idea of what classes are and why they're so important in the programming world. Okay? So I'm not going to get into too much detail about what classes are, but you can think of them as objects, right? We have strings, integers, we have lists. All of these are variable types. So an object is kind of like creating your own variable in a sense. And these objects have properties, okay? So for example, a cookie. Let's create a class of cookie, and it's as simple as doing this. And then how do we give it its attributes? We use something called the init function. Okay, with the two underscores. Make sure you remember that. Now we have self and then our arguments. So I'll explain what self does, but let's think of our arguments right now, okay? Our attributes. So first we want name, right? So the name of the cookie, chocolate chip cookie. And then there's a lot of things like color, texture, size, but I'm just going to go over the ingredients and just two of them, eggs and flour. Okay. Now, a good idea of what you should do is every time you make a new class in the init function, you want to state what type of variable each of your arguments are. So name is a string, right? And then eggs is a float, so basically decimal points, and flour can also be a float. Okay? Now, the reason why we have self, and remember when we're actually creating it, we don't have to state self, but what we're doing here is we're taking the name that they pass in, right? So they give us a name, chocolate chip cookie, and this cookie is a blank object. It doesn't have any properties. So this cookie object, we're assigning its name property to a name, chocolate chip cookie. That's why we do self.name equals name. Okay, same thing here, self.eggs. So this cookie doesn't have an eggs property yet, so we're going to assign it to the eggs that we pass in, which is like 1, for example. And the same thing with flour. Okay, that's how we initialize a function. How do we create an instance of this cookie? Well, simple as assigning it to a variable, which is why I was saying it's technically like making your own variable type. So choc chip cookie equals cookie, and then we don't pass in self. That's a mistake people do. You don't have to pass in self, you just have to pass in 3 arguments. This self argument you don't have to pass in right here. So let's do it. So we have our name, chocolate chip cookie. Let's say, okay, now I'm not a cookie master, so I'm just gonna go with 1 and 1.5, okay, for normal chocolate chip cookie. The reason why classes are so helpful is because let's say we want to have another type of cookie called white chocolate chip cookie. The cookie object has the same basic attributes, its name, eggs, and flour, but the eggs and flour, and the name of course, changes. So right now this is white chocolate. Okay, I'm not gonna spell that correctly. Cookie. And then let's say this takes actually 2 eggs and only 1 cup of flour. Now, if we want to access its attribute, we can do chocolate chip cookie dot name. And if you run this, you get its name. Let's print out its eggs. 1 egg. And this is how you can print out the attributes of your cookie. And there you go. With programming, you were able to create your own cookie with its own attributes. Okay? And this builds up the basis of something called object-oriented programming. This is a huge sector of programming where there's like thousands of classes, right? But not just one, but thousands. And this all builds up a huge project that we see in a lot of our programs today, a lot of our complex programs. So classes are very, very powerful. The last thing that I want to show you is something called a constant. Okay? It's called a constant because it doesn't change. Okay? So this we're going to call serving size. Okay? And we're going to say that every time we create a cookie, the eggs and flour we enter is for a serving size of 12. Okay? So this is something called a member variable. And this is something that will basically, one second, serving size. And usually constant should be capitalized. So this never changes, okay? The serving size for the eggs and flour we enter will always be 12. And that's why we capitalize it. Now, as I was saying, this is a member variable. So basically what this means is we don't have to initialize it. It is already defined as part of the class. So every time we create a cookie, the serving size will always be 12. Now they don't always have to be constant. We can change them, but we don't have to initialize them. Okay, and that's it for this video. So in the next video, we'll talk about how to create something called methods. So where the cookie will actually have like different functions within it. Like for example, a human, some of its methods are like running, talking. You might think, what can a cookie have that makes, what methods can a cookie have? Well, we'll talk about that in the next video. Hope you guys enjoy.